Hi everyone and welcome to The Abstract. Last week we attempted to define Marc Jacobs' creative process in the first segment of this series dedicated to his Spring-Summer 2018 collection. By the way, if you've missed that video, I highly suggest you go check it out before watching this one. So that means we can now review this season's Runway show with all the context that we need. Let's do it. Alright, so the show opened on South Sudanese model Ashok Majak wearing an oversized, bright Tangelo suit in what looked like a light wool crepe fabric. It was layered over an equally oversized, fully buttoned up pale pink dress shirt with an exaggerated point collar, from under which you could spot a thin ochre turtleneck emerging. The suit was belted by a colorful fanny pack in shades of cognac, fuchsia, and ivory. And no, we are not talking elevated fanny packs like those teeny tiny ones at Givenchy or these huge but very sharp ones at Rocha. We are talking first degree July tourist gear here, and a pair of thick-soled, sporty, plasticky mustache sandaled confirmed the deliberately dorky nature of it all. And because less is a bore, Marc Jacobs decided to top the whole thing off with an ivory satin turban, pinned with a big gemstone-encrusted strawberry-shaped brooch. The last look, on the other hand, was worn by model Kaya Gerber, daughter of none other than supermodel Cindy Crawford, and consisted in a long, flowing canary yellow nightgown with a straight fit and slight mock neck. It was completely covered in sequins, adorned with an exaggerated flower applique at the left shoulder, and decorated with chandelier-like trinkets. As a result, the dress scintillated and chimed as Gerber walked down the side in Park Avenue Armory. The outfit was completed by bejeweled silver T-strap slide-on sandals with a bright yellow plastic sole, as well as a turban, matte opera gloves, and a beaded rope belt, all of them jet black. In between came several day-wear options, some more appealing than others. The second and third look, for instance, which consisted in a droopy, oversized cardigan and pant ensemble and its v-neck and skirt counterpart, both done in a single super-saturated color, were neither appealing nor wearable or even remotely visually intriguing or challenging. On the other hand, the variations revolving around sheer body-hugging turtlenecks, swishy harem pants, loose sequin crop trousers, and nylon or translucent PVC anoraks made for an impeccable play on color, texture, and proportions, while also striking the perfect balance between comfort and panache, wearability and cheekiness. They were followed by some of Marc Jacobs' customary outerwear offerings in the form of raincoats, car coats, and pea coats, as well as bomber jackets, capes, and suits, which were either rendered in rich hues or in a neutral palette, with the occasional plaid or pinstripe shaking things up. Several jumpsuits and ensembles reminiscent of ski and flight gear also made for an interesting proposition. Done in a variety of iterations, they were rendered in conventional neutrals, but also unexpectedly done bright abstract shapes, exotic Ankara-inspired patterns, or whimsical daisy prints. The utilitarian influences, though still visible, were more subdued in the blue-collar inspired overalls and coveralls that followed, and even more subtle in the next two outfits, which made for fresh and effortless alternatives to the summer suit. Now, while Marc Jacobs' daywear propositions, which he consistently accessorized with glossy turbans, eye-snapping boas, and statement jewelry, were far from being understated, they were nowhere near as over-the-top as his party clothes and formal wear. These only punctuated the show instead of being shown at the end, as if Marc Jacobs was looking to blur the lines between day and night, and ultimately questioned the relevance of a dedicated wardrobe for each. Case in point, these relaxed sequined midi dresses in shrill color contrasts, which were loosely belted at the waist and unpredictably worn with black socks and bejeweled slides. Then came some long and flowy voile dresses, sometimes worn over pants, eye-catching jumpsuits, and fluid trouser ensembles, which were offset by swirly patterned micro dresses worn with opaque black tights and square-toe patterned leather Mary Janes. There were also three color variations of the same outfit, which was composed of a beaded cage top paired with a satiny hybrid between harem pants and track pants, and of course there were gowns. Fit for a diva, they were all full length, sometimes cut in shimmery satin and other times fully covered in sequins, at times rendered in a vivid solid color and other times enlivened by geometrical patterns, and again, counterintuitively, matched with flat sporty sandals. Saying that there was a lot going on in this show would be quite the understatement. Take the color palette, for example. It went from strikingly bold colors such as Tangelo orange, Fandango pink, and India green to rich tones of burnt orange, cerulean blue, and tickle me pink, and from subtle tints of pastel pinks, blues, and greens to stark neutrals like whites, blacks, grays, and browns. The materials, fabrics, and textures were as diverse, with each conveying a specific feel to the garment. The knits were cozy and the wool felts elegant, the satins flamboyant and the voiles enigmatic, the furs and feathers a little chic and the synthetics sporty. And speaking of fabric, there was a lot of that, especially for a spring-summer collection. More often than not, tops hit at the hips or below, while bottoms either hit mid-calf or were full length, giving the collection an air of modesty that was accentuated by the unrestrained use of layering and by the relaxed, if not oversized, fit of the clothes. The turbans, which concealed all but one model's hair and sometimes evoked the Muslim hijab, contributed to this impression and, quite frankly, made one wonder whether the show was anything but a thinly disguised attempt to court the wealthy Gulf Arab demographic. Far from being unostentatious, however, the head wraps made quite a statement and were only the first items on a long list of accessories and adornments, which ranged from sporty bags, fanny packs, and sandals to swanky opera gloves, eccentric boas, and imposing jewelry, glitters, sequins, feathers, trinkets, and fringes. It was all absurdly hyperbolic, but Marc Jacobs had decided to throw a party and he would spare no extravagance. In the designer DNA segment I posted last week, we identified prep and couture as two defining aesthetics in Marc Jacobs' work, and this season the latter clearly prevailed over the first, while the distillation of youth spirit could be found in the activewear-inspired materials, pieces, and accessories. In that same video, I also mentioned Marc Jacobs' knack for the comfort of familiarity. Well, according to the show notes, this season was a revisiting of seasons past, and there was indeed many an Easter egg for who was willing to pay close attention. The first three outfits, for instance, immediately reminded me of another recent collection where Marc was a lot more successful at the oversizing game. In this look from the Fall 2016 collection, the slightly more structured shapes and the subtle play on color and texture brilliantly elevated the distorted proportions, something this year's interpretation unfortunately failed to do. Also from the Fall 2016 Runway, this outfit is most likely to have been the inspiration behind the unapologetically flashy bombers showed for next spring, which will surely be hot commodities in stores. If you look closely, you'll notice that even the proportions were faithfully reflected. The looks featuring anoraks and harem pants, on the other hand, were probably nods to the Spring 2007 and Spring 2010 collections, with which it obviously had shapes and cuts in common, but also shared a fascination for the exotic and a certain romance, the latest rendition being the most ethereal yet. The 2007 show was also the first one where Marc Jacobs combined two of his favorite embellishments, flower appliques and all-over sequins, on a single dress. These two elements, which the designer once again resorted to this year, became a Marc Jacobs signature ever since that show. Oh, and what about these dresses from Resort 2013? Do they ring a bell? Trust me, you could play this little game for hours. But while Marc Jacobs did lay it on thick with the self-referencing, his and his team's mental vacation beyond the urban landscape of New York City inspired them to infuse the creations with an exotic, decadent flair that gave them a new lease on life. Some creations were evocative of the ample and comfortable boubou, a piece of garment typically associated with the Islamized populations of West Africa and born from the fusion between their clothing and that of the Berbers as early as in the 5th century. Even more ancient is India's quintessential piece of garment, the sari, whose earliest depictions date back to 100 BC, and by which Marc Jacobs was clearly inspired for this look. As for the harem pants, on the other hand, they were called the shalvar, which was worn by Persian men and women alike since antiquity, before becoming increasingly associated with the Turkish costume after the Ottomans adopted it in the 14th century. There were also nods to foreign cultures through homages to other designers. For example, these tops weren't without reminding me of Yves Saint Laurent's 1967 African collection, which drew from the art of the Bambara people, a family of ethnic groups living primarily in Mali, known for their distinctive way of portraying the female figure, usually with a very long torso. There were also overt references to Pucci's mid to late 60s collections, which were at the time inspired by horizons as diverse as the African continent, from Mali to Congo and Tanzania, by the Mediterranean area, by India, by Turkey, and more. It is worth noting that Emilio Pucci was, among many other things, a World War II pilot and Olympian skier, so it wouldn't be that far-fetched to assume the flight and ski suit Marc Jacobs showed this season were nods in the direction of the Florentine designer. In fact, Pucci's fashion career got a jumpstart when Harper's Bazaar photographer snapped a shot of a ski suit he had custom made for a female friend on the slope of Zermatt. And while that 1947 rendition was rather understated, much bolder proposition closer to Marc Jacobs would later come. And speaking of other designers, let's see how Marc Jacobs' show compared with other Spring 2018 collection. Like many of his fellow designers showing in New York, Marc Jacobs set out to shake off the gloom of political uncertainty with rich and colorful creations that screamed fun and optimism, and a diverse cast that suggested yesteryear's fake dreadlock controversy hadn't fallen on deaf ears. This show also confirmed that last fall's incursion in activewear wasn't a one-off, and Marc once again acknowledged and endorsed the global athleisure macro trend by relying heavily on sporty materials and silhouettes. Finally, and as one might expect, several aesthetic elements he resorted to, like fringes, pink, plaid, plasticky materials, and opera gloves, turned out to be unpopular among other designers. But Marc Jacobs also managed to set himself apart from the crowd by not giving in to the latest obsession with experiential and immersive shows, which had some rely on BMX stunts and guerrilla shows in Bushwick to get the audience's attention, forgetting to make good clothes in the process. He showed in his beloved armory, which, in stark contrast with his maximalist clothing and colleague settings, was entirely stripped down and limited by a single line of aluminum folding chairs for the audience to sit on. The expansive, cleared-out perimeter allowed for more than the usual quick scan as model rushed by, while the absence of music invited the guests to pay even closer attention to the clothing. At the end of the show, the 56 models re-emerge in unison for a hauntingly beautiful finale to the aria from Catalini's opera La Valli, marching with the tranquil confidence of a united front before they faded away like the mirage Marc Jacobs had invoked all along. Alright everyone, I think this wraps up our runway review segment featuring Marc Jacobs Spring-Summer 2018 collection. Let me know what you guys thought. Did you enjoy the collection? Did you see something that I missed? Are you looking forward to wear anything? Is there anything you wouldn't be caught dead in? You can let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and follow. That way you won't miss next week's segment, which will revolve around one major element of this collection. Maybe you can guess what it is. All bets are off. Au revoir.